Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is boy, Big L in the building, getting some housekeeping things in order. Mm. Man, good evening, good evening. It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've come through. It's been a minute since I've done this. I made a commitment to do this. Uh, so I'm going to maintain and keep my commitment. Part of the reason why I feel the need to do this uh, book club is because if we haven't learned anything with this past presidential election cycle, is that there is a great need for political. And one of the best ways to get political education is to uh, read books, to get history from our elders, folks who've come before us and given us great insight. And since I am someone who is an avid reader, uh, lover of Black folks across the diaspora, um, fighter, advocate, protector, Black folks across the diaspora, I feel the need to continue to um, find ways to get this information out to our people. Um, so, again, my name is Elgin Bailey. This is the Page Turners Book Club. Currently, we are reading Black Awakening in Capitalist America by the late great Robert L. Uh, Allen. He drops some jewels in this particular text, man. I encourage everyone to go out and read this because it is very, very important to get an understanding of where things are, why things are the way they are currently. So, what I do here at the Page Turns Book Club is that I pick a book and I encourage those who follow the Page Turners channel, whether it be via Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, to cop the book, uh, read the book, or you can just listen to, watch these videos of me discussing these books, man. The Page Turners, where I believe doing this changes the current state of Black lives one page at a time. And I never try to for you folks too long. Uh, I like to get in and get out. I know folks are incredibly busy with life. They have a lot of stuff going on. So what I like to do is just give people 15, 20 minutes, man, um, of reading on the text and keep it moving. Uh, Again, that's the goal. That's what I do here at the Page Turners, man, to uh, try to help folk, man. Try to help folk as much as possible get a better understanding of where things are. Uh, I know there's been some issues with YouTube, so I imagine that at some point in time, there may be, this should be on YouTube at some point in time, but it is currently streaming live via via Facebook. Uh, and I know for some reason everything is lagging a little bit. So forgive me if this doesn't come out in the manner that I would like for it to come out. Uh, but the goal is to share, man. The goal is for this uh, to reach the folk, to get people to be able to have a clearer understanding of where we are in this climate, in this world, man. So again, this is the Page Turners Book Club with your boy Elgin Bailey, reading Black Awakening in Capitalist America. It is now 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I promise you, this will not be a long reading, but the point is not to be the length of these discussions. It's the quality of the discussion, man. So do me a favor, man. If you peep this, when you do peep it, make sure you uh, share it with your people, man. Share it with your people any which way you typically share this information with folks. So again, Black Awakening in Capitalist America by Robert L. Allen. Uh, I'm currently on page 30. We just got finished discussing I lost my train of thought that fast. Forgive me. We just got finished discussing Robert Williams, the great Robert Williams, one of the most instrumental pro-gun black people, pro self-defense black people in our history. So I'm gonna dig in without further ado. Page 30. Malcolm, the ideological father of the Black Power movement, and one man to whom Harlem's angry masses looked for new leadership, was killed just 50 weeks after he officially broke from the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims. And that's important because I didn't know it was that short of a time frame. It was less than a year. During that last year of his life, Malcolm made two trips to Africa and one and the Middle East, which seriously influences thinking because we know, based off of information that has come out here recently, Malcolm's trips to Mecca uh, didn't change his thinking, it evolved his thinking. Let's say that. He began carefully to reevaluate the social and political ideas which he had accepted while in the Muslims. He set up the Organization of African American Unity, partnering Afghan of African Unity, which he hoped would implement his new ideas and launch a decisive attack on the problems confronting blacks in America. So even after his trip to Mecca, where his thinking evolved, he still had a desire and a will to change the current state of black folks across the diaspora. Okay. But assassin's bullets cut down this new beginning before it bore fruit. Malcolm had become a follower of Elijah Muhammad, messenger of Allah, while serving a 10-year prison term for armed robbery. Before that, he had lived in the underworlds of Harlem and Baltimore's Roxbury district. Roxbury is predominantly black environment. At this time, it was predominantly low socioeconomic also. Okay? He was probably attracted to the Muslims by their open denunciation of the white devils as oppressors of the black race, and Muslim campaigns for self help and moral uplift among converts, factors which brought many ex convicts into the nation. Now, that's a good place to pause for a minute. Currently, within Christendom, there is and has been some conflict between uh, certain members within the Christian community and the BHI, which is the Black Hebrew Israelites, and there's a number of different sects. I'm not going to break all that down, but one of the things that attracts so many Black men, particularly to the BHI, the Black Hebrew Israelites, is the fact that these groups that has multiple sects tend to offer Black men a sense of allowing us to openly and proudly express our Blackness. Okay. And that's something that, unfortunately, within many parts of Christendom, Blackness is something that is forced to be on the back burner. Okay. Even though we have, womanist theology, Black liberation theology, all of these theologies that push Blackness to the forefront, that centers our theology around Blackness, overall within Christendom, that's not the case. Okay. Released from prison in 1952, Malcolm's keen mind and penchant for oratory soon thrust him into the top of Muslim leadership. In 1954, he was appointed minister of Temple Number 7 in Harlem. He became the first national minister in 1963. Malcolm traveled over the country evangelizing and establishing new temples, while brilliantly sparring with critics. He was quick witted, with a biting sense of humor, and he knew how to handle an audience, black, white, or mixed. Malcolm was an activist, and this was at the root of his split with Muhammad. In the 1960s, the Muslims were increasingly charged by black militants with taking tough but never doing anything, talking tough but never doing anything. The freedom movement was gaining momentum, and it was no longer enough to simply denounce white devils. The Muslims abstained from any form of political or social activism, and Malcolm was beginning to have his doubts about the wisdom of this policy. In his autobiography, he admitted that while still in the nation, he began to think the Muslims could be a greater force in the American black man's overall struggle if we engage in more action. Okay? But such ideas clashed with the aims of Muhammad and his lieutenants. Malcolm was suspended from Muslims in December 1963, allegedly for his highly publicized chickens coming home to roost remark about President Kennedy's assassination. It soon became clear, however, that the suspension was to be of an indefinite duration and that he was no longer welcome among Muslims. The following March, Malcolm announced that he was breaking completely with Muhammad, which was a major, major, major move and major decision to do. Major decision. Took a ton of courage for him to do such a thing. So that's very, very important and crucial, man, to get that part understood. Okay, it took a lot of strength for him to step away from the Nation of Islam because he knew the Nation of Islam's deep seated secrets. He knew their ways, he knew their policies. And anytime that you're deeply entrenched, rooted in a particular thing, with us, it's very difficult for said organization just to let you walk away scot free without any sort of uh, consequence. Okay. It became clear, however, that the suspension was to be of an indefinite duration, that he was no longer welcome amongst Muslims. The following March, Malcolm announced that he was breaking completely with Muhammad. He said that he was willing to plunge into the civil rights struggle around the country because every local campaign can only heighten the political consciousness of Negroes. Carefully reshaping his thinking, evolving his thinking, okay? Shifting Muslim dogma and dropping unacceptable tenets while incorporating new ideas picked up from his wide experiences with non Muslims. Malcolm started constructing his political ideology. He realized the need for identity among Black people if they were effectively to attack racism and exploitation in America. He called himself a disciple of Black nationalism, which he as the effort of Blacks movement of their own to fight for freedom, justice, and equality. The kernel of Black nationalism, he said, and here's a very important part, he said, was the idea that Black people should control the economy, politics, and social institutions of their own community. Thus, he identified Black nationalism with the general concept of self determination. After the split, Malcolm no longer endorsed utopian separatism, the doctrine that Blacks should return to Africa or devote their efforts to setting up a Black state in the United States. He still rejected integrationism as either phony tokenism or an attempt to assimilate Blacks into a decadent white society. Unlike the Muslims, who attributed the cause of Black oppression to the evil of white race, Malcolm realized that it was the structure of society to which one could trace not only the roots of Black people's misery, but also the genesis of white racism itself. Okay? In a speech in May 1964, Malcolm argued, the system in this country cannot produce freedom for African Americans. It is impossible for this system, this economic system, this political system, this social system, this system, period. It's impossible for this system as it stands to produce freedom right now for the Black man in this country. This is what the great, can't even understate that, but the great Malcolm X said May 1964, he's making it. Now you can look now and you can actually take that same statement and still apply it to our current state here in America. And I'm going to read this quote again because I think it's something that we really need to chew on for just a little bit to let it digest and to simmer within our collective consciousness. Okay? This is in a speech in May 1964. The system in this country cannot produce freedom for an African American. It is impossible for this system, this economic system, this political system, this social system, this system, period. It's impossible for this system as it stands to produce freedom right now for the Black man in this country. Yet, so many of us, and I think this is not a knock against us, this just adds a little bit of extra vision to this particular thing. So many of us within this country want better seats at these systems table. We want to either have better seats at these tables or to emulate these tables. So for many, we want to emulate these very systems and try to implement these said systems that oppress us, thinking that if we create our own, we can get some sort of freedom. But what Malcolm's is the system itself, these systems that are the issue. Okay. In answer to a question from the audience, he said, it's impossible for a white person to believe in capitalism and not believe in racism. You can't have capitalism without racism. If you find someone and you happen to get that person to a conversation and they have a philosophy that makes you sure that they don't have this racism in their outlook, usually they're socialists or their political philosophy is socialism. He thus carefully and consciously avoided falling into the trap of attributing racism to human nature. How often do we see that component? How often do we see us try to attribute and say that racism, white supremacy is part of human nature, or it's if we can just educate, if we can just somehow touch the moral components of those who capitalize off the system. We can just educate them. And you notice that right after um, brother George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor was murdered, if you looked at the New York Times bestseller list, up and down that New York Times bestseller list was so-called anti-racism literature, were the top selling books in this country during this time because many believe that education is the key to ending racism. That education, if we can just educate people, if we can just somehow educate people to get an understanding of how racism works, if we can somehow, convince those who are racist to that it's a moral issue, or if we can somehow get those folk to realize that it's a sin issue. See, so it's always an outside dynamic. It's very rarely is it an internal pointing of the finger to say, no, you are racist and you need to stop being racist or acknowledge that you're racist so we can move accordingly. But we get so wrapped up, and then I notice it every time, man. So often we get caught up in trying to convince people of their racism. So we'll argue, we'll spend hours and hours debating back and forth, trying to logically convince people of their racism. So we'll spend hours trying to debate back and forth with people who align themselves with Trump's ideology, trying to point to them, hey, there's something wrong with your logic here, thinking that if we can just flip a switch somehow in their minds, that they would stop being who they are, not realizing and understanding that racism is more about power than it is anything else. It's more about power than anything else. That's why you can see, and for example, you can see people who are in so-called interracial relationships, and the white person in those relationships, sooner or later, you'll notice that their family holds racist ideology and mentality, and then you'll see these reports and these things that come out saying that, oh my God, I've been married to such and such non-black white person for all this time, and all of a sudden showing their racism. No, 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 no. It's not all of a sudden. It's always been there. We have been conditioned to look for racism as coming forth as being called nigger, as some external display of hatred, that's how we define what a racist is, not understanding fully that racism is a power dynamic. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why Black folks are able to be victims of racism is our lack of collective power. So we don't even have the power to hold people accountable for their racist acts towards us. So when they do something racist towards us, we have to depend on the racist system to give us some sort of justice against the racists. So the very people who are harming us, we have to depend on them to defend us. So when racist cops commit acts of violence against us in the streets, we have to depend on the racist court systems to come through and give us justice. So we're depending on the racists to protect us and give us justice from the racists. And we wonder why that shit don't work. Excuse me. Let me continue reading. Although he advocated self determination for blacks, Malcolm understood that this can never be achieved within the framework of an exploitive capitalist system. Again, unlike other black nationalists, Malcolm realized that it was in the interest of militant blacks to work for change throughout American society. For it is only if the total society is changed that the possibility of genuine self determination for blacks can be realized. Black control of black communities will not mean freedom from oppression so long as the black communities themselves are still part of or subservient to an outside society which is exploitive. Now, I'm going to read that paragraph again because I think it's crucial that people hear that clearly. Okay? Malcolm realized that it was in the interest of militant blacks to work for change throughout American society, for it is only if the total society is changed, not reformed, not have new laws, new policies, changed, that the possibility of genuine self determination for blacks can be realized. Black control of the black community will not mean freedom from oppression so long as the black community themselves are still part of or subservient to an outside society which is exploitive. Malcolm did not live long enough to elaborate fully a program of action. He did advocate that blacks engage in block voting, although he noted that sometimes, as in 1964, there was not much choice between a Republican wolf and a Democratic fox. I'm not looking to be messy. I'm not looking to be petty here, but he did not advocate that blacks engage. He did advocate that blacks engage in block voting, although he noted that sometimes, as in 2020, there was not much choice between a Republican wolf and a Democratic fox. Now I added the 2020 in there because, yes, I truly believe that it was important for Trump to be out of office. But what we cannot afford to do is to buy into this notion that Biden is not a fox. In his statement of aims, the organization American community blocked to make the community its power potential. We will start immediately a voter registration drive, make every unregistered voter in the African American community an independent voter. We propose to support and or organize political clubs to run independent candidates for office. Support any African American already in office who answers to and is responsible to the African American community. In the economic spirit, the OAAU merely pledged that it would wage an unrelenting struggle against economic exploitation of all forms. So when we talk about voting and we talk about election and we talk about some of the things that we as a people, and I'm speaking specifically and exclusively at this moment of Black folks, particularly working class, poor Black folks, because the Black elites operate on a whole nother system and a whole nother mentality than poor working class Black folks operate. Okay. And we'll get into the class distinctions and the impact that that has on our community at another time. But I want you to hear this, what he suggests that we as a community, as a group of people do, not wait until a couple of months before that comes every 4 years. years candidates to get this particular candidate to come through and do what we need to do because that shit doesn't happen that way. So here's what he says. I'm gonna read it again. In his statement of aims, the Organization of African American Unity stated that it would organize the African American community block by block to make the community aware of its power and potential. We will start immediately a voter registration drive to make every unregistered voter in the African American community an independent voter. We propose to support and organize political clubs to run independent candidates for office, not Democrats, not Republicans, not some other shit, independent candidates. Because if you are aligned with one of these, the top two parties, or the only two parties of significance, unfortunately, when you become a member of that party and you become a candidate for office for that party, you ultimately have to align and will align some of your politics to fit those particular structures that you align yourself with. So if you are a Republican city council person or state rep, you're going to align and be forced to support particularly Republican aspects. The same shit takes place with Democrats. You have to. It's just the game. It's the way it's played. Uh, Malcolm realized that the system he opposed was based ultimately upon force, and that the dynamic of radical social change in America was moving inexplicably toward a violent confrontation. In a speech in New York on April 8th, 1964, Malcolm described the process he saw unfolding. And I bet you when I read this, you're going to see some very stark similarities between what was going on in 1964 and the shit that's happening right now in 2020. Malcolm described the process he saw unfolding. So today, when the black man starts reaching out for what America says are his rights, the black man feels that he is within his rights when he becomes the victim of brutality by those who are depriving him of his rights to do whatever is necessary to protect themselves. As an example of this was taking place last night at this same time in Cleveland, where the police were putting water hoses on our people there and also throwing tear gas at them. And they met a hail of stones, a hail of rocks, a hail of bricks. A couple of weeks ago in Jacksonville, Florida, a young teenage Negro was throwing Molotov cocktails. Well, Negroes didn't do this 10 years ago. But what you should learn from this that they are waking up. It was stones yesterday, Molotov cocktails today. It will be hand grenades tomorrow and whatever else is available the next day. There are 22 million African Americans who are ready to fight for independence right here. I don't mean any nonviolent. He wanted to be certain that his audience, which was mostly white, had not misunderstood. Malcolm added that the Black Revolt was being transformed into a real Black revolution. Revolutions are never fought by turning the other cheek, Malcolm said. Revolutions are never based upon love your enemy and pray for those who spitefully use you. And revolutions are never, we shall overcome. Revolutions are based upon bloodshed. This ambivalence probably stemmed from misgivings Malcolm had about potential allies. He knew that for the Black Revolution to succeed, it needed revolutionary allies, and he saw two possible sources of such allies: militant whites of the United States and the people of newly emerging nations, the former colonies of Africa and Asia, and the oppressed people of Latin America. But he had grave doubts about the so called white radicals. He thought that many of them could not seriously identify with the struggle, the aim of which was undermine and destroy the basic premises and institutions of their own society. The reminder, he thought, would probably be co opted. You can cuss out colonialism, imperialism, and all other kinds of isms, but it's hard for you to cuss out that dollarism. When they drop those dollars on you, your soul goes. As far as white workers were concerned, he had no faith at all that they could be anything but reactionary and racist. But he had grave doubts about so called white radicals. Reading Black Awakening in Capitalist America by the late great Robert L. Allen. I'm going to stop on page 36. Every time I read this book, man, or read sections of this book, and again, I've never read this book, so I'm reading the book and getting information new with many who are watching this. It's it's fascinating to see that so much of that stuff, man, so much of what is stated in this book is it's like some dude, it's like Robert Allen is still alive and he just wrote this yesterday. This stuff is still taking place, man. Those quotes from Malcolm was 1964, family. It's 2020. It's 2020. It's 2020. And this is stuff that was written and spoken in 1964. I don't, and that's why I say reading and having book clubs and black folks picking up books that were written from the black radical thought perspective. And again, this is not a knock against, the Wilkerson lady who wrote The Warmth of the Sun or The Caste System or, any of these other books. What's my man's name? Who wrote, you got two of the anti-racist books out. One is actually something about anti-racism. Stamped from the Beginning was his first one. Or the Tim Wises of the world, or the Robin DiAngelos of the world. They give you this insight and this perspective on. I, I encourage you, man, cop this book. Begin to read this book. Walk through. I'm going to be doing this. Try to do it at least once or twice a week between school and work. It gets a little difficult, and a whole nother podcast that I'm a part of. Shout out to my family over at the In the Black podcast, Big O and Crush. Uh, but these conversations are needed, man. It's needed. And I kept y'all, I wanted to keep y'all. Uh, I've been here for almost 40 minutes, man. I usually try to hit y'all with 30 minutes, man, and get y'all up out of here. But again, share, allow people to hear this, man. Uh, Not for me, because I'm not trying to get shit out of this. I'm trying to help folks so folks can help other folks. The motto is looking to change the current state of Black lives, one page at a time. It's your boy Big L, man, with another episode of the Pageturners Book Club. Currently reading Black Awakening in Capitalist America by the late, great Robert L. Allen. Till next time, family. I'm out.